Well, hi everyone. I'm Lori La Bey and welcome to Dementia Chats. Today we're going to have a conversation about acceptance. What is it? How do you get to it? How can it hurt you if you don't? And what are some of the benefits? And so we're going to be talking to two of our experts today who are living with dementia and who know best. And I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves. So Paulan, you want to go ahead?
Sure. My name is Paulan Gordon, and I live in Arizona with my husband. And I am living with vascular dementia. I was diagnosed 8 years ago, and I am active with Dementia Action Alliance and Dementia Mentors. And I'm pleased to be here on Dementia Chats.
Great, thank you. And Laurie?
Hey, my name is Laurie Scherrer, and I was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's and FTD, which is frontotemporal degeneration. I live in Pennsylvania with my husband and little dog, and I'm involved in Dementia Action Alliance and Dementia Mentors and some other things, and it's just really great to be here.
Wonderful. I'm going to have Paulan start us off with kind of defining what acceptance is to you. What does it mean?
Well, I think when I think of acceptance, the first thing I think about is the fact that there are things in life that we don't have control over. Always are. There are things that we do not have control over. And we have a choice of either fighting them or accepting them. And I think acceptance means to me that you say, okay, this is my new reality, whatever the situation is. For dementia, for instance, that's what we're dealing with. We say, this is my new reality. Now, what am I going to do about it? The people that I know that don't have acceptance, the things that they seem to do are either they retreat or they have denial about their disease, or they retreat. Those are some of the responses I see from people who do not have acceptance. The responses I see from people who I think have acceptance are that they're more positive and they have found alternative ways to do things, that they've found workarounds. They found ways to adapt to their new living situation, and that's what I think acceptance is.
Okay, great. And Laurie, how would you define acceptance?
To me, acceptance is determining that this is the way it's going to be. You have no option to change it. It's not going to change. And therefore, you have two alternatives. You either figure out strategies and ways to make them the best of the current normal, or you go, woe is me, poor me, and live a miserable and sad life, falling into depression or anger or whatever. I think we've seen that currently with COVID. We don't have any choice. COVID is here. And if you look around, you see businesses as well as people that have grasped the concept that it's not going to change right away. And they've come up with new norms. For example, the number of businesses now using Zoom and other video technology, and individuals. My sister reads her grandchildren a bedtime story on Zoom like 3 times a week. And that's the new norm. They can't visit each other, but they can still see each other. I think with dementia, we have the same thing. You either can make the best of the situation, find ways to make the best of the situation, or you can throw in the towel and be sad and miserable.
So what you're saying is adapting throughout the disease, then. I think both of you are saying you need to adapt and kind of accept the new realities as it is. And to me, it's kind of interesting because that's what we do. That's how I perceive everybody living their life anyways, for the most part. It's constantly adapting. If it's going through ages in schools and marriage and divorce or job changes or whatever, we adapt. But those who don't really struggle. And that gets really, really difficult. So let's talk about the importance of adapting, of acceptance. and what that can do to your mind and your body with that. Paulan?
Well, acceptance frees you from spending your energy in a negative direction to begin with. It takes you out of that negative role and it puts you in a positive frame of mind. And I think that it helps you be creative and think of new ways to do things or to adapt to your situation. You know, that's all you can do when you have any kind of difficulty in life, is you have to figure out a way to change it or adapt to it. And if you can't change it, then you have to adapt to it, or else you're just going to be completely miserable. I don't really think you have a lot of choice unless you want to be miserable.
That's a good way to put it. I like that you said about lifting your spirits, and I loved what you said about creativity, because I think as we grow older, and this starts at a very young age, we kind of get squashed into a box of how things are supposed to be done or how they've always been done. And to me, that kind of limits our creativity in and of itself. Laurie, what are your thoughts?
As Paulan was saying, we have the option of how we want to live and which way do we want to have our spirits flowing in positive energy, or do we want to have them flowing in negative energy? By accepting that this is the new norm, that allows you the ability to try and figure out ways to deal with the new norm. When you have to stop driving, okay, you need to find ways for public transportation or friends, relatives, whatever. If you don't accept that this is the way it is, you're not going to go opening the box to look for new ways to do things. I think that's one of the most important aspects to me in accepting something, is that when you accept it, you open the lid, and now you can look inside and figure out new ways to make things happen. You pull things out of the box that you never knew existed, that will help you in the things you do in life, whether it's finding strategies on how to do things that you can't remember how to do. I'll use an example: recipes. I can't follow recipes anymore. They're all over. You know, you've got the ingredients up here and the instructions down here, and you have to go back and forth. So the option is stop cooking, which I'd love, but I can't do that. And get a chef. That would be really nice, but I can't do that either. So my option is to figure out what I can do so that I can read a recipe. In my case, what I have to do is I take the ingredients and then I add them in to the part of the recipe. So as I'm reading the instructions, I can check off everything that I was supposed to put in when I was supposed to put it in. That helps me to maintain some of my independence until you really accept your current situation. And we'll talk about the situation of living with dementia. Until you accept that situation, you can't figure out ways to make the best of your life, to live independently as long as possible, until you accept that that's the new norm and figure out how to make the new norm the best you can make it.
Those were good examples with that. How do you, so now, okay, we're talking about acceptance. It's good for you. It's going to lift your spirits. How the heck do you get there? What advice would you give somebody living with dementia or just diagnosed? How do you get there? And Paulan, we'll start with you.
Well, I guess when I think about it, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of people who are newly diagnosed with dementia. I see a lot of those as they come in for mentors. And I see a lot of denial of their disease. They don't really want to work with us. The family wants them to work with us. They don't want to work with us because they don't have anything wrong with them. And it's kind of that situation. And I see that and I think, they're afraid. They're afraid of a lot of things. They're afraid that, there are things like, I don't want my husband doesn't want the people at work to know, this, I don't want this to happen. I don't want this to happen. Well, all these things are going to eventually happen, you know. And the thing is, it's better to be prepared for it, is how I kind of look at it. So how do you get there? Well, I don't know. I guess you hang out with people who, one of the things I recommend is hanging out with people who have acceptance and who have found positive attitudes and ways to go forward. I guess that would be my first recommendation.
Well, and that's a great one, because I mean, you think about any business person out there will always say you network with people above you so that you're constantly learning. And not that you don't have things to share for them, because you're going to point out things that they don't see either. So it's not a devalue thing, but looking and watching, and gosh, having the ability to actually talk to somebody, or write to somebody or Zoom with somebody that to actually had all the feelings you've had. Because I think everything you said is normal. Everybody's afraid. No one says, hey, sign me up for this one. This sounds like a great joyride, give me dementia. I mean, that's not the real world. And so understanding that they're not alone, I think is so important. But how do you get there when there's all these fear mongers out there? And when I'm saying fear mongers, I'm talking about the things that we put so much into, like, what are other people going to think? How are they going to treat me? Will I lose my job? Is somebody going to pull my license? Is my family going to pull my authority over my own money? And my house, and all of those things come in, because when you go into the doctor, they're like, and don't forget to get your affairs in order, making it sound like this is happening tomorrow. And so one of the questions I want to ask both of you, just to state for people, is, like Lori, how long have you been living with this disease?
5 years.
5 years. And Paulan, how about you?
8.
8 years. And my mom lived with it for 30. Now, in her 30 years, she wouldn't have been able to do Zoom, but for, I bet at least 20, maybe even close to 20, 23, 25 years, she probably could have participated in some level. It was just the last really 4 years was, where she really couldn't communicate that much. So, I mean, no one has a time frame on this. And I think that's one of the things that we have to get through at the doctor's office, in terms of how it's presented, because I think some of those fears might be able to be disengaged if it was presented a little different. And maybe I'm wrong on that. Laurie, what are your thoughts about how do people get there? And what are your thoughts on doctors' presentations of handing over that diagnosis?
That's a chat in itself, but I'll start with how you get there. To me, I think the way you get there is you start with counting your blessings every single day for all the things you can still do. Don't focus on what you can't do, focus on what you can do. And then make yourself understand that when you come out, when you start telling people you have dementia, there are going to be friends that you lose. There just are. But there's also going to be friends that are going to be able to help you. And I think this became a reality to me when I was at a party and I said to someone, how's your dad? Well, her dad had died a year ago or 9 months ago, whatever it was, and I was at the funeral and I forgot. Now, if that person didn't know I had dementia, I mean, it was embarrassing enough as it was, but if they hadn't known I had dementia, how insensitive would that have made me look? So I think you need to understand that most of the time, it is to your benefit for people to be able to help you and understand you and not look at you when you forget things like, oh, she didn't listen to me. I think that's the main thing, because we don't remember things. People look at us and go like, weren't you listening? I told you that. Well, if they know there's an issue, then they can be more understanding and they can help you. But also understand there are people that won't be able to handle the diagnosis, whether it's at your job, your friends, your family. There are people that can't handle that. As far as the diagnosis, I wish they would take every neurologist and make them go back to school and learn a little bit of compassion. When I was diagnosed, basically the doctor said, get your affairs in order, take these antipsychotic drugs because, or he said to my husband, she is going to need these because you're going to need to control her behavior. See a elder care attorney, get your affairs in order, spend as much time with your family as you possibly can while you still recognize them. And everything was doom and gloom. There was no literature. There was no compassion whatsoever. That needs to change. It should be, here's some support groups that you can get involved in. Here's some chats you can listen to through Alzheimer's Speaks. They should be given some material, and basically we're not. At diagnosis, we're giving nothing other than go home and die.
I still hear that too all over the world. It hasn't changed, and not just the neurologists, but the general practitioners too. When they're referring somebody out, they have to, I don't want to say buffer it, but they have to be more realistic. Things have changed a lot out there, and they don't know. And it would be nice. I mean, I think of, I've had a couple of lumps removed that, weren't anything and ended up, thank God, not being breast cancer. But the way they handle it, I mean, they're right there stepping in to calm you down when you're going, yeah, and they know that they anticipate that fear and that sadness and that overwhelming feel, and they're there with support. And they're there with support when they refer you out and when you walk into the door or make the next appointment. I mean, it's constant there. And I think we do disservice by not having that in place, especially when this disease is such a major player in the world, at so many levels. And it's becoming more and more apparent with that. I love the idea of people being able to give resources out. And so many people have tried to break into clinics going, here's a pamphlet, here's some information from real people actually living with the disease that, are attached to various organizations that are doing amazing work, like Dementia Mentors and DAA. And there's a ton of them out there. And nobody knows because they're not, it's almost like they're being muffled. And which is really a sad situation. And I don't necessarily think it's intentional. I think a lot of it has to do with the lack of time in the positions, and there's 10, 15 minutes in or out, and that's all the doctors have. And again, the lack of training there. Paulan, what do you think about doctors? Could they change things up a little bit to improve?
Oh, of course. I mean, the thing is that they don't have any kind of follow-up. They shouldn't just be an appointment and you're done. That shouldn't be how it goes. I mean, you should have an appointment, and then you need time to think of it a little bit, and then you have another appointment with the doctor, that where you really can ask your questions and things that have popped up, and what your concerns are and things like that. And there needs to be, more information, much more information coming from the doctors, much more information. I mean, they could be directing you to support groups or to, different agencies and different things like that, different organizations. And it would be so easy, for them to do that. To have a little sheet would be like nothing. They do it for everything else, but they don't do it for dementia. I don't know. I think that the doctors do a real disservice in this regard, because they really need to be encouraging things like social interaction, talk about things. There are things that can be done, No, there's not a cure, but there are things that can be done. You can find alternative ways to do that. You can get support from other people. It's just like, people a lot of times make the analogy with cancer diagnosis, and it's so true, there are always all these opportunities they give people with a cancer. Here, do this, do that. Here's some support groups and resources. None of that happens with dementia, and it's really, really sad when I see people that are in denial. I just, it's so hard to bring them out of it, and if the doctor could have helped that process a lot. The doctor could have helped that a lot, I think.
Oh, I agree. I mean, and I really think that, and I don't know if you guys would agree with this or not, but even having a neuropsych for the family to discuss, because they're very realistic about what the progression is going to be and how it varies, and that they're open about talking about feelings. And if it was addressed that any chronic illness, you're going to have all these emotions, and you're going to be processing, what's my life going to look like, and you're going to be grabbing for control, and all of those things are normal. But when you're not told they're normal, it's easier to spin in it, and then you're scared to tell anybody, because now that you've got a diagnosis, I would imagine you're trying to fit in even more. You don't want other people to know. I mean, so it's kind of backwards in terms of helping people embrace their new normal and get to that safe space. Laurie?
I truthfully believe that some of the reason that people have such a hard time accepting their diagnosis and making it their new normal is because of the way the doctors present it and the stigma in general. For example, when you're diagnosed, the doctor is nothing but doom and gloom. Oh, you're going to come to the point where you can't recognize your family. Oh, you're going to have behavioral issues. You better be prepared with these drugs. And oh, you're probably going to have sundowning. Everything negative. If instead they changed it around to say, live the best you can, try the best you can, do what you can do, and be prepared as your symptoms start changing. Know you're going to need to make changes in your life, but in the meantime, there's nothing stopping you from doing everything you think you can do. The doctors don't encourage you, as Paulan said, to socialize. And in fact, they often leave you to believe you're the only one in the world under 65 who has dementia. And so you think, oh, golly, I'm a freak too. Not only do I have dementia, I'm a freaky dementia person. But if they encourage socialization, if they encourage you if they gave you websites and stuff, but they don't do that. After I was diagnosed, about my third visit or fourth visit back to the neurologist, I took a list of all these wonderful resources I had found. I said, look at this. You need to be giving this to people that are newly diagnosed. She handed it back to me and she said, oh, I think that research drug must really be helping you, because look how much better you're doing. You just,
Ba-boom.
I'm having a good day. I'm trying to share this with you while I'm having a good day. And she had no understanding of that. And that's very sad. It's sad that the doctor cannot look at it as a positive, cannot give you anything positive to live. And therefore you feel like you need to die.
I do have to say that the neurologist I have now, this is my third neurologist, third or fourth, I'm not sure. But anyway, the neurologist I have now is a little better. When I went to see her last time, she said, what about cognitive therapy? She's thinking anyway. I said, I get enough cognitive therapy right now in my life with everything I'm doing, but thanks anyway. But I mean, at least she's thinking, she's thinking in a positive direction of what can this person do to improve their, their level of functioning.
It's funny, as you guys were talking, I got a ping. I get these motivational quotes, and this one's from Maya Angelou, and it's perfect. And it says, you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. I love that. Thank you, Maya. And it's that whole mindset of still believing in yourself, that you have something to offer. And I mean, I've seen such transformation in people through like Dementia Chats, through Dementia Mentors, through DAA, and so many others, where you're allowed to have your voice be heard, and you are so well respected by so many others getting diagnosed, and through the mentoring, or just them, some, you know, because some people don't want to do the mentoring, but they'll be voyeurs and they'll be out there kind of checking things out. Everybody does stuff different, and that's okay. But they get hope, they get empowered, and they're like, wow, I'd look at her, I wouldn't know she had dementia. Well, you know what? That's how other people are looking at you too. You know, they don't know. And we shouldn't be looking for those judgments. And, you know, I wish I would have learned a lot earlier to let some people go out of my life that weren't aligning with what I needed as a person. And so as hard as it is to lose people, and I go through this routinely where they just kind of peel away, and I think it's the older I get. So we were talking about this offline, you know, it's kind of a wisdom thing about acceptance. But every time that happens, people that meet my needs, understand me, and fill my soul enter. And then I feel like I'm a better person for that and can reciprocate, because, you know, there's nothing worse than not feeling aligned with who you're hanging out with. And if you're not accepting of yourself, how can anybody else be accepting of you? And, you know, I had one person say to me regarding dementia that it's kind of, they related it for a person in denial, that it's kind of like a person who might be gay, homosexual, whatever you want to call it, not letting others know. And they're hiding it, and they're living this double life. And how much more work that is to try to be, you know, who you are at your core, and who you're trying to be for everyone else, and maybe for yourself too on that. Go ahead, Paulan.
I think the other area we kind of touched on a little bit is with this coronavirus. I think it's the same thing. I think this whole acceptance issue applies to that too. We've got a lot of people who are accepting it, and we've got a lot of people who are not accepting it. The exact same thing. And the people, you know, who are not accepting it and saying everything's wonderful and fine, and we'll just go our merry way and be in big crowds and crowd the beaches and crowd everything and don't worry about masks or any of that stuff, you know, we'll all be fine. That's, again, you know, the whole denial. And where is that going to lead, you know, for them?
Yeah, that's very true. And this Memorial Weekend really brought that to a head in terms of people's beliefs. And, you know, it all comes out in the wash one way or the other. Might not happen today, but 3 weeks from now, it's going to be really interesting what happens, you know, with the numbers. And then, you know, when, I don't know, I find for myself, just in life in general, the longer I wait to make a change or adapt, the more hoops I have to jump through. Versus and then the more people that might be surprised going, well, I didn't know. And it's like, well, yeah, it's kind of hiding it all, you know, or whatever the deal is. And so now, I mean, it's this whole thing, because you've convinced others that it's not an issue. And then you're fighting even harder inside. And I just think of all that, the work, the mental exhaustion that it takes to try to, you know, pretend like something's not wrong when it's really crawling at you. Laurie, Paulan had just talked about the coronavirus, and do you have any comments on that in terms of this discussion and acceptance?
I think we've seen many people who are just sitting at home going, oh, this is horrible. And yeah, it's easy for all of us to look at, in one way or another, our finances have been impacted. Either our pensions, which were in stock, went down into the toilet, or we suddenly can't work and we're losing money that way, whatever. Or the price of hamburger is up to $8.99 a pound. No matter how we look at it, we're all financially feeling the impact. So you have the people that are like, oh, this is just horrible, this is horrible, and totally dwelling on the negative. Or you have the people that say, hey, I heard about this great new thing called Zoom. Really? You have the people that accept it and the people that wallow in it. And then you have the people that say, well, I don't care what they tell me, I'm going to do what I want to do anyway. And that's where I think we definitely have seen that with the COVID and the impact of it. And, when I look at the people that I know, I think the ones that have accepted it and found ways to communicate in spite of having to stay at home are the ones that tend to be a bit more happy.
Oh, I'd agree. I've seen a lot of people say, I have to unfriend somebody at Facebook because, they don't agree with my value of wearing a mask and going out as little as possible and adhering to the guidelines. And they're like, I had no idea that they were that mean. I mean, because some of them are downright mean with some of the comments and stuff that they're making. And what people don't realize is that is happening with dementia too. I mean, there are some major trolls and little scumbags out there that beat you guys up and say, I don't believe you have it. And, the bullying and stuff that goes on. And, you need people around you to stand up, to those things as well. And people can't help if you don't tell them really what's going on and how you're feeling. And, I think another thing in our society is that we tend to think that if we have sad feelings or if we're depressed, that it's a bad thing. People will look down on us. And it's like, well, who wouldn't be depressed? When you get a diagnosis of dementia, it's not like a big surprise birthday present that you were hoping you were going to get, I mean, that's not the case. It's not on your bucket list. And so it is going to take you back, and it is normal. But, we live in this society where everyone tries to pretend everything is perfect all the time. And I think that that's done us a big injustice as well. And I think there's so much to learn through people with a chronic illness. I think people in general, but especially somebody dealing with a chronic illness, because those of us that don't have one, we don't know what it's like. And we're never going to know what it's like if we don't talk to somebody who has it, because it's evident that most of the doctors and a lot of the people that work in the field, if they haven't been personally touched by it, there's a big difference. There's a really, really big difference. And not that we don't have some great staff out there, but again, there's a whole different perspective once you've been personally touched. And especially if you've been touched in the way of diagnosis itself, you just have different insights. And one of the beautiful things that I think I've seen in the community is that everybody is accepting that everyone's symptoms are a little bit different. But you guys all come together and go, these are normal emotions and feelings, and you share how you process things and your kind of tips and tricks to help one another out. And that's really powerful stuff, not just for the person newly diagnosed, but I see it being powerful for those giving that information too, because you find a new purpose. Lori, any comments? Oh, there goes that hand.
Yeah, I think we also need to, in order to truly accept our lives for whatever it is, we need to also seek out others who can motivate us and make us say, maybe I'm not so bad. For example, Nick Vujicic, I think is his name. He was born with no arms and no legs, and yet he does everything. He skydives, he scuba dives, he does boating. They have learned ways to help him do almost anything he wants to do. He's married, he has kids. And then Johnny Erickson, she's paralyzed from the neck down, and yet she paints beautiful pictures with her mouth. Okay, now I can look at that and I can say, yeah, I have a lot of issues. But wow, look at how these people took their issues and they learned how to make the best of it. Look at other people that we know living with dementia and how they've made the best of it. Norm, and all he's done, and Kate Swaffer, and just so many other people, in spite of having dementia, they have learned ways to not only accept it but embrace it and make it their life, and make the best of their life through their dementia.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful lessons for me as daughter of a mother who had dementia was learning to ask the question, what's the lesson? Let's not have this all be for nothing. What's and there's so many beautiful life lessons through dementia in terms of how to be a better person, how to be more accepting, not only of yourself, but of others, you know, how to be more compassionate, there's how to get comfortable in silence as the disease progresses, and to know that your relationship is more than just chitter chatter. There's so many lessons in this, and you know, I look at all of you know, both of you, and then all the rest of our group and the advocates, you know, all around the world, and the difference they're making in terms of shifting. I mean, you guys are the ones that are really shifting the world to become dementia friendly. It's not, you know, it's not people like me and organizations. It's really your voice, in my opinion, that's making the difference. And there might be people like me or organizations that help lift that voice, but it's truly your voice that is changing how people look at the disease. And you know, we have patient advocates in a lot of other areas, but the healthcare hasn't really grasped that, oh, people with dementia could talk. They could actually speak to people. I mean, you still hear that at conferences. Well, wow, I didn't know. I mean, I see that in conferences all the time when I have people with dementia on a panel speaking, and they're like, I had no idea. Well, because you never asked them. You know, we have to all learn to ask. And people with dementia have to learn to be open in telling us or asking for what they need too, and not being shy about that. What are some of the pitfalls? Let's go a little bit more in depth about not accepting. We talked about depression and things like that, but can we give maybe some examples of why you think it's so important, and how you maybe seen a person's personality and just being, I'm going to say, almost squashed by this disease and by non-acceptance. And Paulan, I'll let you go first.
Well, I guess the first thing when you say that squashed by this disease, first thing I think about are the people that retreat to bed. And I hear this a lot. I hear when I go to care partner groups, I hear this a lot from care partners, that they're the person they're caring for, no longer, they sleep all the time. That's all they want to do. They never get out of bed anymore. They were just diagnosed, you know, they were newly diagnosed, and that's it. And those are some of the things that people do. You know, the other things they do is or the other approach they take, they deny. They go into denial and say, I don't have this disease. And they fight it, you know, and they say, well, I can do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this and this and this, and they really can't do all those things, you know. And that becomes a very dangerous, can be a dangerous thing. You know, there are a lot of dangerous things we do because of a lack of memory, you know, and can trigger a lot of problems. So I think that not accepting can cause a lot of dangers, really, in your life, in addition to making you an unhappy and unmotivated and sad person. I think can cause a lot of barriers and problems in your life.
what about relationships? You know, because sometimes people go, you know, my body, my decision. And, you know, you hear that a lot in with alcoholics and different things where maybe they're in denial of what is going on. And yet it affects other people. You know, all of our moods, no matter who we are, and our communications affect other people. How have you seen it affect people's relationships? And we're talking in generalities, so we don't want anyone to feel like they're being exposed or anything on this, because I think a lot of this stuff is really, really common.
Go ahead.
I think to me, one sticks out in particular that she accepted her diagnosis, but not that she could make a new normal out of it. And so from the day she was diagnosed, everything was, I can't do that. I can't make my lunch anymore. I can't get dressed. I can't. So way before it was time, everything was, I can't do that. I can't do that. Instead of, okay, how can we do this? How can we make sure I can live somewhat independently? How can we make sure that I can find ways that I can continue to do this? It was, I can't, to the point that she totally believed it. And now she's probably right. She probably can't, because she can't get herself moving enough and motivated enough. And what she really lost was not her ability. What she lost was her motivation. And that's sad, because that's definitely because of accepting the diagnosis, but not accepting that there are alternatives on how to live with it.
Well, and don't you think sometimes it depends on the people around you? Because I mean, I've seen some families where the families keep telling the person they can't. And so, you know, you have to surround yourself with people who understand and believe, and, you know, and to, I think, get a little maybe more okay with failure, and just go, well, at least I tried. You know, I didn't get it right, but at least I tried. I mean, that's kind of what motivated me, even for Alzheimer's Speaks, was, yeah, this isn't about being perfect. We just got to make some changes here. And we have to get other people to make some changes here. And they're not all going to be great ideas. And they might work for a while, and then they might not, or they might not work at all from the beginning. But again, it gets back to, what's the lesson? What do we learn? How do we adjust again? And try again. And I know a lot of people are afraid of change. That's you know, one of our biggies here in the U.S. especially. And you know, change can be pretty dang exciting. I mean, I think of how many times I've heard from, and I feel this myself, from people living with dementia, the great friendships they've developed that they never would have had, or the great sense of purpose that they have that they never had before. And they're like, you know, this has really enhanced my life in a lot of ways. But again, we don't hear people talking about that. We don't, you know, that it's like the good's almost a taboo thing, you know, when it comes to living with dementia. And that's where I think your voices are so important. Paulan, I think you were going to make a comment.
I was just thinking about somebody that, you know, I think sometimes when people don't accept their diagnosis, what happens is they just become frozen and stagnant. You know, they can't, they become inflexible, and they just become depressed, you know, and they just sink into a depression is what happens so frequently. And it's so hard, you know, I'll talk to somebody and they'll say, well, you know, I'm just really depressed. And they say, I don't want to go to those meetings and see those happy people. And I think, well, you know, maybe those happy people might be a good idea. You know, I mean, but it's, you know, when you get into a mindset like that, you can really get trapped. You really can get trapped when you get into a depression mindset, and it's very hard to get out of it. So I don't say this is easy. I don't say it's easy to just accept all this, accept your diagnosis and move on, and make your changes and change your life. It's not easy. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes getting out and really seeing, is this other way that people are doing things, is it really working, and can it work for me? And that's kind of what you do, I think.
Yeah, one of the things when I speak, and I talk primarily to professionals and to families and stuff, but I think the concept works the same, and I call it the tears, fears, and joy. And because everybody falls into this, I mean, anyone who's human, but the fears or the tears are about everything that we've lost. And with dementia, it's constant. I mean, you don't know day to day, moment to moment, what's going to be there, what's not sometimes. And you're constantly in that mode of having to let go and just adjusting to whatever the new normal is that day. And just because you lost something, weren't able to do it one day doesn't mean you won't be able to do it the next day either. And I think that's a big misunderstanding with the disease as well. But what I found is, for the tears, you can't have great loss without having great love or great appreciation for what it was you had to begin with. So for me, and when I speak, I tell people, if you can switch from grief to gratitude that you had that to begin with, because some people might not have ever had what you're missing right now, or what you're feeling lost for. And not that you don't have to grieve, but for me, it helps pull me out of the rabbit hole a little bit faster. And then the fears are usually about, oh my gosh, what about this and that? And then they said, this could happen, and da, 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 and the whole list. And then, I was always one to be prepared and have my lists and have my plans A through Z. And then what I realized is that, what, even if, excuse my language, shit hits the fan and what I'm thinking about is going to happen, I'm still going to have to adjust the plan I thought of, because everything's going to be different. Hopefully I've picked up a few new tips anyway. So I don't need to focus that nano focused on all of those things, because I've learned to say, all I can do is the best with what I have at the moment that I'm given, to deal with the situation. Not that I can't educate myself and be prepared, but I don't have to will it on me either, that it's coming sooner than not. And so I also found, for the fears, again, was just kind of letting go and having the belief in myself that I'll deal with it. And if I have a good support system, I'm even stronger, with me. And then the joy I found is you can only create it or recognize it in the present moment. And if I'm spending too much time worrying about the past of what I've lost and shedding all my tears, and if I'm, spending too much time in the future and feeling all that fear, I'm going to miss out on opportunities right before me. And so I'm a firm believer that we only will find what we're looking for. And joy is in front of us all the time. But when we get distracted in the past, in the present, we miss it. So sometimes just getting people to believe that there can be joy, and being around those happy people is a good thing, and that they've kind of laid the golden egg there. They've found that, they feel that, and they enjoy that space, and they relish it. And who doesn't want to, have joy in their life? And that comes in many, many different levels. So sometimes it's a matter of people sitting still and saying, what does make me happy? And then adapting, like you said, to make that work. So we were talking about the benefits of acceptance for both the person with dementia and their family and friends. Do either of you want to tackle that one quick?
I'll start with that one. I think the benefits for acceptance for the individual themselves is just happiness and peace of mind, and contentment and purpose, a sense of purpose and challenge, that there is hope, it gives you hope that life is not over, that you can still do things, you just do them differently. So it gives you there's a tremendous amount of benefits, you know, in that regard. That's a good start.
And I think from a relationship standpoint, by accepting it and moving on and finding ways to make your life the best it can be, it's also healthier for your family and friends, because now they can move on with joy in their life as well, as opposed to being sad. I think when I was diagnosed, I think my 5 siblings and my husband were as devastated. In fact, I know they were as devastated as I was. But when I learned to move on and make it my new norm and learn how to deal with it, it helped them to be able to deal with it. And I think that's, you know, that's important, because we don't want them to be sad all the time either. It also helped all of us to understand what I need is not for them to do everything with me. I need them to help me do as much as I can do myself. Because I swear the day after I was diagnosed, it was, oh, you can't do that. You can't. No, let's talk about how I can do it. And by me accepting the whole process, the whole journey, it really did help them.
And being able to laugh at yourself is really important. It's really important. And, you know, it can be humorous and funny and entertainment. I find it kind of entertaining, and at times I think, how could this possibly happen?
Well, and I think that's healthy. And I think most people, you know, look at themselves at times and just kind of shake their heads, and laughter's so important. I mean, it changes our chemistry, the whole 9 yards. I also think when you were talking about relationships, because we talk about this with caregivers and care partners, like when they enter the room and they are trying to pretend everything's okay, and they got the Stepford Wives smile on, but their insides are going, yang, 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 you know, life's not okay. That people with dementia are picking up on all of that. Well, the same goes the other way. You know, our nonverbals are huge. And so, and anytime you have a loved one who's feeling out of sync or sad or angry, I mean, you don't want that for them. You know, you want to be able to help, but you don't always know how to help either. And so being able to have a conversation can, I think, help both sides. But acceptance on both sides can really power you ahead. Because again, sometimes it's not just the person with dementia in denial. Sometimes it's the family members or their loved ones or significant others or friends that are in denial and fearful. And so having those conversations are important. Any last comments?
Would add that I think that children are very resilient. You know, they're much more resilient than adults are sometimes.
That's true. That's true. Well, they haven't learned that people are judging them yet.
Right.
For our younger ones and stuff. Lori, any last comment?
No, I think my one main point would be, I want to live out every moment of every day as much as I can, happy and joyful and in a positive way. And if other people are bringing me down so I can't do that, or other things are bringing me down, then I need to look at changing those things. And if I'm not accepting and moving forward with my journey, then I'm probably going to be one very miserable and sad person. And that's just not a good place to be in.
Yep, agree. Well, thank you both for your insights and being so honest. I think this will help a lot of people. It's just wonderful, wonderful information and a huge need out there. So have a great week, everybody, and make sure you pass this video along. It's an important one. Bye now.
Bye.